What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am welcoming back to the show comic writer Chris Condon. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to be back.
It's so good. I was prepping for this interview, and I was like, we haven't talked in 3 years. Back when Texas Blood Volume One was coming out,
Yeah, it seems like yesterday, but apparently it was 3 years ago.
I was
Who
like,
knew?
I was prepping for this. I'm like, I was looking at the old video just to make sure we weren't going to recover too much old ground. But I'm like, oh, I guess it's 3 years. It doesn't matter. But since then, you finished volume one. You've had volume two of Texas Blood, volume three of that Texas Blood. You had a spinoff of the Enfield Gang Massacre. You had a book of, Hell is the Sacred Circle, the wrestling book after Aftershock. You've had some stuff in Marvel. You've had a book in with Harley Quinn stuff and DC. Like, you've been busy since we've talked, so we got a lot
Been
to talk
busy. Yeah, been busy. Been
about.
busy, which is good. I can't complain about being busy. But yeah, it's so crazy how quickly it all sort of it feels like, forever ago and also like no time at all. I don't know. It's like it's so weird how this stuff sort of works because it's, you get so into it and you're all of a sudden you're 4 years later, it's weird. But yeah, but it is good to be back. Good to be chatting with you.
Absolutely. So we first got connected because, like most people, got exposed to your work through that Texas Blood. That first series, issue one came out. I think a lot of people didn't know what to expect. There was a
Hmm.
lot of hype with that book after coming out, and then volume. You had a great story in volume one. Volume two, we start to see a little bit of like a cult come into Texas aspects,
Yeah.
and then volume three, we had a serial killer. Like, let's just focus, and we'll get to some of the imprints, but let's focus on that Texas Blood a little bit for you. How has the
Uh-huh.
journey been for you? I know you and Jacob Phillips being the co-creators of this, of crafting this world of that Texas Blood and kind of expanding this. You've done 3 volumes now in what, 3 years?
Yeah, well, I guess four technically, really, if you want to
Yeah,
include Enfield.
with Enfield.
Um, it's a joy. It's a true joy to work on that stuff. I mean, I love the characters that we have and I mean, I think that I love them from the point of creation, in terms of when I wrote them, but I in the way that Jake draws them, I learned to love them even more because I really just like feel like they're actual people. Because the way that he draws them, they really do feel real to me. And yeah, I don't know. It's weird to there was no real thought process going into like volume two and three and then Enfield. It was just sort of happened. It wasn't, oh, we need to have this many issues or whatever. It all just sort of happened organically. And we're gonna do a fourth volume of that Texas Blood, which is gonna be a heist arc. But that's not gonna happen until 2025, likely. So people are gonna have to wait a little bit for that, but we are gonna come back, and I think it'll be good. I have a pretty good idea of what we're gonna do, and I've talked to Jake about it. And in fact, I actually just talked to Jake on the phone about what we're doing, for the rest of the story of that Texas Blood, and I think we're probably gonna do another spin-off after the heist arc. So it'll be volume four, and then we'll do another spin-off.
Yeah.
And I think we have some pretty cool ideas for that. But it's I don't know, it's really it's exciting and just I don't know, it's really fun to just create a world and have people actually be interested in it. Because I mean, I could have just written this thing and nobody read it. But it's a thing that people love and I love it. So it's like it's something that me and the readers kind of we agree on it and we're like, oh well, they're like, I'd like to see more of it. And I'm like, well, me too. For that for the to be honest, I love seeing Jake create the characters and the way that he handles the way that I write scripts. I mean, I've worked with a lot of artists at this point, and I there's something special about our collaboration. So every time we do a new story together, it's always fun and always exciting.
Is that, and I is that collaboration just get easier and easier as the arcs go along then? Because it seems like you guys are just in sync with each other.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, yeah. I don't really even remember what it was like volume one, but I remember, really loving what he was doing, and I can tell you that I never really have ever had notes for him. I tend not to give artists notes, um, just because I don't really want to step on their toes. I feel like this is their, it's a collaborative thing, and I don't want to. They don't sit there and tell me what to do with my script.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sit there and tell them what to do with their art. But Jake always, I literally never can have a complaint because he always, shoots it out of the water. It's always amazing. Um, but yeah, in terms of whether it was easier now, I think that we do have a shorthand now.
Okay.
Maybe not. I'm still pretty descriptive in my scripts because that's what I think we've come to expect of each other. But I do think that I also have a little bit more of a shorthand with him. And I have a lot more trust in him in terms of like when I'm, if I put, I can write very simple things and know that he'll understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because we also, I mean, we talk pretty much every day with each other, so it's not just like I'll send him a script. We talk every day, so we know each other. We know how we, who we are. So if I put something in a script, he'll understand it. So I think that that's definitely helped our collaboration, which was, I mean, we were in the infancy of our friendship in volume one. And then now we're here where we've known each other and we've spent time with each other. And, we were in Texas together. We spent time in the UK together. He just came out to New York. So we spent a lot of time together too. So I feel like that all informs the sort of the collaboration. And yeah, we definitely have a little bit more of a shorthand, but whether it's easier or not, I don't know. I mean, I guess that means it's easier.
But at least, but at least if there's a rhythm and a flow that you guys have gotten into a little bit, then it seems like,
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely a rhythm and a flow, and I just again like I really just trust his instincts and I trust how he'll handle stuff.
yeah.
Like I mean, perfect example is the last issue of Enfield, where I felt like I was like I don't know if this is gonna work, and I sent it to him, and like he read it and he was like, no, I think this is great, and I was like, what do you think about this specific thing? And he's like, no, I think it's good, and I'm like, all right. And I'm like, I guess I'll just wait and see, if he's actually able to pull it off, and like immediately he pulls it off. So it's just yeah, so it's totally the the way that we work has sort of it does have a rhythm to it, and it does have a I mean it's definitely it I totally nixed my last answer. It's gotten easier. Um
It just
but
see, the
yeah.
more and more we talk, the easier it gets to answer. It's just
I'm just
like that. It's just
realizing.
like great.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's he's a joy to collaborate with, and I'm really, I'm glad that there's some of our other friends in the industry, they want to work with him, and
Yeah.
so he's doing that, and I'm really excited to see that stuff too, because it's just, I mean, people hear me talking about working with him, and they're like, oh, I want a little bit of that
You're
action.
like, okay, but just remember, we still got some bad Texas blood to work
No,
with.
I mean that's like we don't own each other, so it's
No.
we're very freewheeling. Um, we let each other do whatever we want to do.
Yeah.
I do try to have him involved in everything I do though, in terms of covers. I try to get him to do covers or something, at least.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
one of the things you were talking about the last issue of the Enfield gang, and you're like, what if we do this? And then you do this. And I'm after just rereading, I go, I think I know what you're talking about of when we're gonna go with our
well,
and then what we're gonna do.
I mean it's out, so I mean we could do spoilers if you don't mind. I could
No,
talk.
I don't. So here, this is your spoiler warning. We're talking if you have not read that Texas Blood, A, shame on you. And then B, we're gonna talk Enfield King Massacre spoilers here. So
Yeah.
this is your fair warning, whether you're listening or watching.
Okay, so what I was talking about specifically in issue 6 of the Enfield Game Massacre was the whole sort of the framing of it as there's a when Enfield is hanged,
Yep.
we go through a vision of what their life could his and his wife's or girlfriend's life could have been had he not been killed. and we get sort of a vision of like what if he escaped and then they go off and live together. And I didn't know if that worked because it's a reference to a very famous short story by Ambrose Bierce called in a, The Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge,
Okay.
or An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, which is a short story that a lot of American English students will read in like high school or middle school. It was something that I read, and I always thought it was awesome, and it was a Twilight Zone episode as well. And we had named our county after Ambrose Bierce, the author. So I felt like this is kind of, and he lived through the Civil War, so it seemed like sort of a no-brainer for me to kind of bring it all here to tie it in a bow. Um, but also I wasn't completely sold on it because I didn't know whether it would feel like a cop out to people.
Yeah.
But I liked it, so I wanted to try it. And so when I sent it to Jake, that was one of the things that I asked him, does this work? And he felt like it worked. But the other thing is just a very small thing, but it's at the very end of the issue when Amy, Enfield's partner, she goes to visit his corpse, which is in a Old West sideshow in Oklahoma, and the carnival barker sort of has this spiel about if you look into the evil eyes of Enfield, you will see your own death or whatever. And so if you pay a dime, you're able to, go up close to him and look into his eyes, and which his eyes are like these, they would be like marbles or something.
Yeah.
Um, and so she goes up to his face, and we hear the carnival barker asking her like, what do you see? And then we see her face, and then we see his face, Enfield, and he's no longer a corpse, and we see him in the past. And it's just sort of like this nice moment. But I was like, is it too cheesy? Is it too, so I was like, I don't want it to be too, I don't want people to be like, ugh.
Well,
But
see,
I felt like it worked, but I
it
also didn't know.
it in my opinion, it worked because I remember reading that the first time and I reread it to prep for this. And there's a change of the art style as soon as you get to that hanging aspect of where you're like, and I'm like, oh, they're gonna escape. I was like, oh, cool. And you read it, and then you go, wait a second.
Yeah.
But it makes sense then as you process it of like, oh, the change of art style to make it that it was a this is what it could be aspect and things. But I also was reflecting on, I'm like, I think I do like that as a reader because, you know, it's a wild, wild west. Like you don't necessarily always get a happy ending of like, oh, cool,
Yeah.
perfect. They ride off into the sunset. Like, and that's what some of those great westerns, you had your Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid stuff. Like you don't get the perfect ending.
Well, yeah, I think that that's the perfect way of putting it is that a lot of those guys, for all the, freedom that they had in the world, on the frontier, most of them met their end in some horrible way, whether, they completely disappeared or they were murdered or what, so it's, or they got some disease or something. So it's, they're there was very little of a happy ending for most of those guys.
Right.
And yeah, to do the ending in the way that we did, I feel like it worked. But in terms of like the dream sequence, we also dropped there in issue 2. There's a dream sequence. We open with a dream sequence, and it's framed in that same way where it's like the art style is a little different because we do 3 issue or three, not 3 issue, 3 panel pages,
Yeah.
and then we'll do splash pages, and that's sort of the style that we've set up. But I had read some Steranko Captain America issues, in which he did these surreal sequences where there was no panels, but it was essentially laid out like they were panels, but there was no actual panels. There was just sort of they were all free floating, and it added to this sort of surreal quality of. So when I wrote the script, I sort of wrote that in. I actually gave Jake an option. I was like, I want to do it this way, but if you can't figure out how to do it, which is a thing,
Right.
sometimes artists just can't figure out how to do something because they're like, this doesn't make any sense. So you can write it, but like, how do you actually do it? Um, But so I gave him the option of doing that, but I was like, I also literally wrote it into panels. So if like you have to do it as panels, here are the panels. But he figured out a way to do it. And I also had sent reference for the Stranko pages. But in going into that again in issue 6, I felt like if you were paying attention, like if you remembered that, it would be a tip off.
Yeah.
This is a vision or a dream or whatever it is. Um, but also if you don't, it's it's kind of it just like it just feels like this is weird. Like why this is seems kind of outlandish. Like why are they getting away? And like why is this all this happening? And then you get to that last page where we see death on horseback with a white hat.
Right.
Like a Texas Ranger, and and then we go into the snap neck, and then we go to the double page spread. I do think it works really well, and I really the whole of writing Enfield, I was thinking about that issue in those final pages because I needed it to feel worthy of it, you know. And I think that more people than not enjoyed it and really felt moved by it,
Yeah.
which is good. I mean, I ran into my own obstacles with the series just in terms of the way that we kind of laid it out because it was the 3 panels were hard to do.
Okay.
Um, there's not a lot of real estate to tell story that way. And so I kind of had to figure it out as I went. Um, I would think that I had enough space to tell this story, and then I'd be like, oh, well, I can't tell that story. Okay.
Mm.
So I'd have to sort of rearrange things on the fly. But, and it was a challenge, and I loved having the challenge, and I feel really proud of the series as a result of that,
Yeah.
of having dealt with the challenge and overcome the issues with it.
We're at this point when you're creating that Texas Blood. You'll have that, your first volume. It, it does well. Get a volume 2, and you start to figure out where was it where you said, I want to, because this is labeled the Enfield game. It has like the Texas Blood
Yeah.
logo up there, but it's not like it's not Joe Bob. Like we're not getting where what you've done with the first 3 volumes. Where was it where you're like you almost want to use it as like the Texas logo is like an that Texas Blood is a imprint kind of. Then you're going to tell a story through that imprint of this world universe.
Yeah, so I mean so the idea of doing Enfield was Jake's idea.
Okay.
Um, we mentioned so I had come up with the Enfield Gang Massacre as an idea in like 2013. I'd written a pilot script for a television show called Shaman. And it was set in Texas, West Texas, and I made reference to there was a flashback sequence. Anyway, it was very different than what we ended up doing. But I liked this idea, and I'm the kind of person that puts everything into like the file folder, and I'll pull it out later.
Yeah.
And I have that's kind of what that Texas Blood has become is like I have all these stories that I want to tell. And so like 2 of the arcs that we're gonna do in the future are arcs that I've had planned forever. Um and yeah, I don't know. So then Jake read in the back matter of issue 7, in which I had mentioned the Enfield Gang Massacre just offhandedly in the back matter. He was like, "Are we ever gonna see that again?" And I was like, "Do you want to?" And he was like, "Yeah, it might be fun." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Do you want to like do that as our next thing?" And he was like, "Yeah." So we did Enfield Gang Massacre as like a spinoff, but in terms of branding it, we debated on whether to brand it or not because we didn't want to lose people, but we also didn't want to, scare people away from it. If we brand if we made it that Texas Blood colon blah 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 blah. So we tried to make it my thought process, which is what we ended up doing, was that I wanted it to feel like if you're familiar with the hard case crime paperbacks.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, I wanted it to feel like that, where like you see the hard case crime logo and
Yep.
that's the selling point for you.
Yeah.
And so that's how kind of how I wanted it to feel, was that it's like it's there, and it's like it proves that it's like a seal of quality, a seal of approval. But it's not it's not that Texas Blood. It's like a different thing. And so I think probably for every spin-off that we end up doing, um, God willing, there's many. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Um, but I think we'll probably end up doing that with all of them, just because I feel like it does sort of clue people into, oh, this is that. This is a that Texas blood story or
Yeah.
whatever.
Where was it in the process of creating this story? You and Jake are obviously working on this series. And one of the things that I know people talked about, one of the things I appreciated is it feels like an older comic, right? You have the ads,
Mhm.
the paper, it feels different. I'm assuming it's different. Like it, where was this kind of idea to make it almost feel like it's an older comic than it is?
I mean, that was so Jake had been reading Superman 78.
Okay.
He got the hardcover, and the hardcover had the sort of I don't know if they had newsprint exactly, but the paper stock was felt like an older comic. Yeah, and so he was reading that, and that was a thing that he reached out to me about and was like, we should maybe try to do that. And I thought that was a great idea, to try and print on newsprint if we could. And we reached out to Image, and they were like, yeah, it's going to be this much more per page, and it was negligible how much more it was. It was maybe
Yeah.
5 cents per page or something. It wasn't much. So we chose to do it. But in terms of, making it feel like an older thing, I mean, it would just sort of kind of comes down to the idea of doing it as like a sort of a dime novel, like an old dime pulpy novel, and that's what the story is to a certain extent. And we carry that over. We decided to do that for the trade as well. I was reticent to tell people that we were going to do the trade in newsprint because I didn't know if we were actually going to be able to do it because I didn't know if it was going to be able to be printed with the same printer, yada yada yada. I didn't know
Yeah.
if it was going to be possible, but it is, and so we are doing it. So we're keeping it alive, and we're also doing that. We're doing a new 6-page story as well. Uh,
In the trade.
in the trade, yeah, we're doing it's a train heist, a 6-page story. So that also keeps the thread alive of we could, because we know the end of Enfield, but we could always, they have a history, so we could always, and we talk about it in the back matter. There's bank robberies in Missouri and Arkansas and Oklahoma, so there's a lot of stuff that we can do if we wanted to. If we wanted to do more westerns, we could,
Yeah.
which is kind of, I don't think I do it consciously, but in terms of writing back matter, I write a lot of history, and that gives us a lot to play with. So, and I think that's a good thing because it allows it because sometimes when I'll pitch publishers, I'll just send log lines. I won't send like a full pitch. Um, and that's almost like what that is in the back matter is it's almost like a log line for us to be like, oh, that's the kernel of an idea. And then we could flesh it out and do like a full thing later on, maybe one day. So, um, yeah, so yeah, I don't know. But yeah,
Yeah.
in terms of like the making you feel old, yeah, it was just like a mutual thing, and Jake really had the idea to do the pulp paper, but the idea of just doing it as like make it feel authentic just was kind of a no-brainer. Why not? Why print it on high quality paper stock,
Yeah.
you know, when it's a dusty Western?
Right. So you're writing that Texas blood, West Texas style, not necessarily a Western, because like we said, we got a storyline about the cult. Then you had a, I hate saying like leveling up because that feels like that means I didn't like the first volume, but like I
Oh,
feel like
no, I
each
agree.
volume you guys have been leveling up because volume 3 of that Texas blood with the art, with the Red Queen killer was my favorite. I thought you all knocked it out of the park with
Thank
the
you.
way you wrote the storytelling way, the way you obviously I think I said it and then I got you to say it and eventually it got easier working with Jake. But you guys, there's something about how you guys work together, it seems like, but your storytelling, you can craft stories without even have to have a lot of dialogue where I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm sitting there in suspenseful watching, the Red Queen killer sitting in this house drinking a beer and having a sandwich and stuff like this. Like, where do you get these ideas to say, like, I want to tell the story in the midst of this world that we've created? How do you process these?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of I had a title. That's just sounds like, but this is where these ideas come from. It's like they kind of come from nowhere, which was that I had a title for The Snow Falls Endlessly in Wonderland, which was a title that I liked. And originally it was a sci-fi sort of Twilight Zone-y story. But I ditched that and I liked the title and I was like, well, maybe I could use that for something with that Texas blood. Maybe we could do something in the snow. And then I got to thinking that it might be really cool to do since we did a cult arc and we're kind of doing our own things. Like each arc is its own thing. I was like, what if we have a serial killer? So it sort of becomes like a locked door mystery, but in
Yeah.
the entire county with a serial killer on the loose. And that was really where that came from. But I mean, in terms of doing the silent stuff, I just I don't know. I like letting the art
Mm.
speak for itself. I like doing that. I've always been a big fan of like silent film and I love a good silent comic. I think that it's impressive if you can tell a story and have it make sense and especially have it feel emotional. Um and yeah, I don't know. I just had and a snowstorm is usually pretty quiet.
Yeah.
You're usually by yourself. And that's so it sort of lent itself to being a silent arc. And you're not wrong. I feel that way too about the arc. I love it. I think that it's our best work. Some people might say that Enfield is our best work, but I still say Volume 3 is probably my favorite of ours. Especially I forget which issue it is, but there's that opening with the Red Queen Killer breaking into the Lou's house
Oh,
where we see him like pop open the window and everything. It's like issue I want to say it's like 17 or something, or 18. But
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that's in there that I think is some of my favorite stuff that I've written, and same likewise with Jake. It's some of my favorite stuff that he's drawn. Um, with that, and I think Volume 2 also had a lot of my favorite stuff in it, and that's why I'm kind of excited to go back to that Texas Blood, because I think that we both try to, for lack of a better term, level up,
Yeah.
and level each other up. So I'm really excited to get back to that well, and no pun intended. And just sort of, you know, play with that again because it was different with Enfield because Enfield was all new characters.
Right.
And then we are doing another thing together that's not Texas Blood related, and that's another thing that's all new characters, so it's all it's a different thing for us. And then going back to Texas Blood again with the fourth arc, it's going to be characters that we've met before. There's going to be new characters too, but it's mostly characters that we've met before. Um, and that's exciting for me because it's pre-established. Like we already know them. I have a feeling that when I actually get to writing it, it will feel like coming home to a certain
Yeah.
extent. And that's exciting. And that is the thing with, doing subsequent volumes. You did, doing volume 1, where you are setting the scene essentially, and then doing volume 2, where you've already kind of established who the characters are, you can build on it, introduce new characters too, but also just build on what you've already done. And then with volume 3, it was all characters that we've already known. So that was an exciting thing to be, because I wanted it to be, we'd introduced this character of Lou way back in issue 1,
Right.
and I had really wanted to give her the arc. And so we were able to do that. And I do think it's her and Joe Bob's arc. Um, and there was a lot more to their relationship that we ended up cutting, but um, but it's implied in some scenes. But yeah, it's just there's it's fun to be able to, you build up these people and they sort of become people. They're not
Right.
just, characters at a certain point to you, especially as a creator, where you have a history for these people, and especially in the way that we do our series where we see them throughout their life. We introduce Joe Bob when he's 70, so we have this whole history. And so then I have to do some math when I'm doing certain arcs where it's like, okay, how old is he here? Where would he be in his career? You know, where would he be in his life? How long was he with how long was he with Martha, you know, his wife? You know, how old is his kid? So, you know, so like stuff like that where you have to kind of figure it out. Whereas when you're doing a new story with a new character, I don't think they necessarily think about that stuff as much. You maybe can try, but it sort of feels like you're just almost just putting like thumbtacks on a
Yeah.
you know, whereas it feels more organic for me when I'm, you know, doing like multiple arcs of like that Texas Blood, where I feel like I know the characters.
Yeah. Well, when you started with volume one, you like you said, Joe Bob was 70. Did you did you have an envision that like you had these stories that you could tell later on if volume one worked? Or was this kind of retroactively of like, I've created a character that people love and now we want to tell more stories in this world?
There was a thought of doing more in our pitch to Image.
Okay.
We mentioned Eversol 81. Like specifically, like I mentioned it. And Eversol was a character that I had created previously in another story. Which is that's the other thing for me is that like I said, I kind of have this file folder of ideas in my brain with like all these characters that I've created, and you know, luckily they're characters that I love and I want to see again. And we will see Eversol again. Just it takes some time to get there. But you know, it's just I don't know. Yeah, it was always kind of that was the idea was that if it sold and if it went well, we would do more.
Yeah.
And we definitely that was going to be the next arc was going to be Eversol. And the idea of doing it in 1981 was also there from the pitch. I didn't really know what we would do. I didn't hadn't really thought about it that much, but I sort of thought like, oh, we would do a horror sort of adjacent.
Yeah.
Um, Follow up, and it would be set in 1981. And I don't know why I thought that was a good idea, but I just like that's what I went with. And and then volume three, I don't think I had an idea aside from I think I somewhere have like jotted down the note of like Blizzard serial killer. You know,
Okay.
I think I literally had like a yellow legal pad where I wrote down like what I thought. You know, if we're gonna do 6 arcs, this is what the 6 arcs will be. I think that was the third or fourth one, and I ended up maybe swapping some arcs. But you know, I in the letters pages of volume one, I mentioned a heist at some point, and we're now getting to it here. So, but it's also not the way that I had planned it. You know, I don't even know how I was thinking of it previously, but it's, you know, now I have a thought of like when it takes place and where it takes place and, you know, how it
Right.
happens and all that and how like we'll tell the story. So, you know, that's the part that I love about writing, you know, it's just the what they call the discovery phase where you're thinking about it and really dreaming it all up. And that's kind of, you know, luckily with this stuff, I have the privilege to spend time with it, you know, and to have it sit and gestate and sometimes I have years to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, in this case, you know, I didn't know that we were going to take the break that we did between Texas Blood arcs. I had no idea that we were going to take this long of a break, but I'm kind of excited about it now because it makes me, you know, feel like, oh, I can't screw this up. You know, it's been this long and I, you know, kind of talked about it a little bit. And if I'm talking about it, I'm creating expectations and in people's minds, but also in my own mind. And, you know, I can't let people down, but you know, myself included. You
Right.
know, I don't want to let myself down because that's at the end of the day, I am a comic book reader. That's one of the things that I always tell myself is that, you know, what would I like to see in a comic? You know, when I say, you know, and that's what I think about when I do back matter and I think, you know, I think about XYZ and I think Jake thinks that way too. Um, you know, so I don't want to let myself down. So if I end up disappointing myself, that's the worst thing that I could do as a creator. You know, and then it all just sort of cascades from there,
Right.
you know. But I think that it's, you know, we're really lucky to be able to do what we do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, Chris, I want to respect your time. Real quick before we get to some of your other projects that we'll hit on as we end up here. I gotta ask. The big thing on issue one was the casserole dish.
Yeah.
Everyone was talking about the casserole dish. Have you gotten to sign any casserole dishes at a con?
No, I would
No
love
one's
to
done it
sign a
yet.
casserole dish.
People,
I
if
would
you're
love to sign
listening,
a
go
casserole
bring
dish.
a casserole dish, Chris.
Well, it was fun in the issue 13 back matter. I included a casserole recipe, which was
Did
fun.
you really?
Yeah, it's like a green bean casserole that I sort of there was an actual green bean casserole recipe that I sort of mashed with my own ideas of what I wanted to do. Um, but it was a real Texas green bean casserole recipe.
Well, Chris, I'm
You
I'm
could
so
check later.
I'm so happy. One of the shows that I do on my channel that I have not gotten to do for a little bit is my wife and I, we do comic book cooking show where we pick recipes from comic books and we create them. And holy buckets, I don't know. I've read all the issues. I don't know how I missed this, but it looks like we're going to be doing a green bean casserole episode of our cooking show.
Well, I hope it's good. I hope it's not bad. I mean, I don't cook often, but I like to think I'm a pretty good cook. So I hope it at least translates fairly well. It's
Well,
Martha's though. It's Martha. So if it doesn't work, it's Martha's fault. Fictional
well,
Martha.
well, we will check that out for sure then. I'm like so giddy because I'm like text my wife, I'm like, we got a new episode we got to shoot because we've done a handful of different ones and I'm excited now.
Yeah. I'm curious what other recipes are out there in comics.
So the first how this that idea kind of started was the Green Arrow chili is in a back issue of one of those. So we did that. And then we've done there's a series from Aftershock called Chicken Devil by Brian Buccialetto. So,
Yep.
and we did the hot chicken sandwich there. In the back of an issue of Southern Bastards was Jason Aaron's mom's fried apple pies. So we did those. Uh, we've pulled some stuff of like Harley Quinn's egg sandwich in the Birds of Prey movie. Like she talks
Mm.
about what it is. So we take all those things and we try to figure it out. Or there's
Did you figure it out?
we did, and it was delicious. So
Okay, good.
and so like we've done some of those where it's like comic book adjacent to like Mr. Miracle. He's always in the Tom King one. He's always eating a pastrami sandwich, and it's from you can see where it's from. Like the logo's kind of blurred out, but like we Googled LA pastrami sandwiches and we found the recipe to recreate it. So we've found some, and now we've got a green bean casserole to do.
What's the famous deli in LA? I forget now.
It was like it
Not
started with
that.
like an L. Well, at least this one, it was like Laney's or Lonnie's or something from that. But
Oh, I know it. I used to live in LA, so I know it and I can't think of it. Oh, I'll remember like halfway through the rest of the podcast.
well, and you can mess with it. So um so no, I'm excited for that. So Chris, again, like I said, I was gonna respect your time and I just went on a tangent here, but uh what else do you have that you're working on that you can talk about that you got coming out that you encourage people to check out?
Well, I mean, there's not much that I could talk about that I'm working on currently, but Jake and I have a story in the back of Blue Book 1947 that we did. And that's coming out it's coming out in April. It's issue 3, Blue Book 1947. It is a true weird backup, is what they call it. And it's the first thing that I've ever written about my home state of New Jersey. So I'm excited about that. It's very sort of close to home. It was sort of a high school staple was that you go to this place called Clinton Road and you drive up and down Clinton Road and it's a haunted road. So there's all sorts of stories about it. And I just wrote a story that was that, a bunch of kids in a car getting high and smoking a joint and trying to scare each other. And that was, that's what the story is. They talk about UFOs and ghosts and all that kind of stuff and mob stuff. I so there's a lot of stuff that I got to put in there and it was really fun to do and it was black and white and Jake and I got to do a black and white thing. So and that's coming, yeah, so that's coming on April. I don't remember the date exactly, but I'm really excited about that. And then I have Night People, the adaptation I did of Barry Gifford's novel, which was it was, it is a challenge to adapt, and but I'm really proud of the work in it.
Yeah.
Because I do think that it really allowed me to try something new, try something different, and very much it's his work, but I was able to put my stamp on it through how to tell it visually,
Mm,
and also just it was a challenge to figure, okay, because I want to keep as much of his dialogue as possible,
right.
without adding anything new. And so there's here and there I would add a line of dialogue or something. But overall, it's pretty much his dialogue. But all I had to do was just shave it down and, shave down the narrative. So it's like, okay, I can't do that scene, take it out, and or move a scene here. So
Mm,
that's really what I did, was just, sort of, cosmetic surgery.
yeah.
Um, yeah, for lack of a better term. But so yeah, but yeah, I especially issue 3 is my favorite of them, because I love the story in that one. That's my favorite arc, or my favorite, because it's essentially 3 or 4 short stories, 4
Yeah.
novellas in a novel form. So there's some interweaving stories, some interweaving characters, locations appear and reappear, but it's primarily that. So that's coming out. The second issue is out in April. The first issue came out last week as we talked.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and so I mean, and Brian Level did the first issue, and he knocked it out of the park. His wonderfully gritty, cartoony style.
So good.
Um, you dug it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I love it. I loved it. I
Oh
love
yeah.
the art style. It was interesting to see, like you said, you have original screenplays, you have adapted screenplays, and so to see the kind of transition and stuff, like it's cool like that.
Yeah. Well, I think I hope that people, readers of my stuff will be able to be like, okay, this isn't something that he would write himself,
Right.
but it's interesting to see, how, you handle adaptation or whatever.
Yep.
And so that's